Welcome to this edition of the Good Air Show, a production of the Good for You, Good for All campaign, promoting Pennsylvania's parks and recreation. I'm Tim Hurd, CEO of the Pennsylvania Recreation and Park Society. And our guest today is Mr. Dan McCarthy, Advocacy Manager for the National Recreation and Park Association, and the organization's lead on its trademarked Park Champions Initiative, who is joining us to talk a bit about how all of us can become better advocates for the parks we love. Welcome. Please tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Hey there, Tim. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So as you said, I'm the Advocacy Manager for the National Recreation and Parks Association. For those of you who don't know, we are the leading not-for-profit organization dedicated to advancing and recognizing the power that park and recreation agencies and professionals across our nation have in being a catalyst for positive change. So I have been with NRPA, a little over 3 months at this point. Still getting my feet wet, but it's been a wonderful experience. But prior to joining NRPA, I am coming from the world of grassroots organizing and advocacy in the anti-hunger and anti-poverty space. I was doing organizing up in Massachusetts for the Greater Boston Food Bank. So bringing that sort of learning, that sort of focus on equity to the work that we're doing here at NRPA, and the critical alignment and the work that we do in this space and how it connects to the social, emotional, mental, physical well-being of people and communities. So there's natural alignment, and I'm just thrilled to work on this.
And we're glad to have you in that exact position with that kind of background, bringing that to the parks world. So, and glad to have you here today. So wonderful.
Thank you.
You know, the year 2020 demonstrated that parks and recreation is unquestionably essential. Through every phase of the pandemic, park and rec providers work tirelessly to keep individuals safe, delivering vital emergency services, distributing meals, offering recreational opportunities that promote physical and mental health, and keeping our parks safe, clean, and ready to use. And all of this at a time when those same professionals were dealing with cutbacks, furloughs, lockdowns, and working from home, while record numbers of people flocked to the parks for mental and physical relief. In some counties in Pennsylvania, mobility to the local parks surged over 280% in the month of May alone. Our state parks saw more visitors than ever, nearly 47 million, an increase of greater than 26% over 2019. This simply and strongly demonstrates that parks are indispensable to our personal, social, and community health. But there's a but coming. Parks are also underappreciated when it comes to reinvesting in them for our own good. Research has shown that during times of financial stress, parks are the first of community service to be cut, and they tend to be the last to recover. Meanwhile, decreased staff, increased usage, and a growing backlog of maintenance are taking their toll on these essential public services spaces that a thriving community absolutely relies upon. So that's a bit of a setup for our discussion today, the whys and hows of becoming an effective advocate for your local parks and recreation system. And this is where Dan comes in. So let's start with the basics. What is advocacy and why is it important?
Well, before we go there, I just want to underline, that wonderful intro that you provided and really just highlight some of the ways that park and recreations have demonstrated that they are essential services, essential service providers in communities. We saw that throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, but we also know that intuitively, right? Community centers are the center of communities. park and recreations are where people gather. It's where, I would go to my local county fair every single year with my friends and families. Where I would go to play baseball with my brothers during the summer, but also it was where folks who were in need of support would go for that support. We saw it down in Texas during the energy crisis that they had this past year. Who were the people on the front lines? Where did people go when they needed support? It was park and rec agencies.
Yes. Yes.
So I think you are exactly right. Park and rec agencies are a critical part of this civic infrastructure in every single community, and they should be recognized as such. So to answer your question about advocacy can be really scary. It's a fear of the unknown, especially for folks who operate in this space, in the nonprofit sector or governmental or quasi-governmental agencies. We tend to be rule followers. We want to make sure that we're not doing anything that undercuts our mission, that takes away from what we're supposed to be doing day in, day out. And in this space, frankly, everybody is suffering from a lack of capacity. We all wear a million hats. There's a million and one things that we need to do. And advocacy often is viewed as just one more thing. And frankly, folks don't necessarily understand the connective tissue between being an effective advocate and their core mission, right? If you are understaffed, underfunded, and you have to successfully operate 3 different programs, and also you've got to open this new space, and also XYZ, you're working from home, you're facing a once in a generation pandemic, advocacy often falls to the wayside. Understandably so. I mean, I don't blame folks, but my job here is to help folks engage in this space and recognize the importance of advocacy to their mission and make sure it's as easy and effective as possible. So that's a long way of saying, what is advocacy? Advocacy is something we all do in our daily lives every day. It's supporting something. It's the process of supporting a cause or a proposal. How many times, Tim, have you and somebody said, where are we going to go for dinner tonight? And that person throws out a restaurant. And you say, actually, you know what? This place down the street, they've got some great ribs. They've got a really great drink selection. I think we should go there. And this is XYZ reason. That's advocacy at a very low micro level. But advocacy is something that you do in your daily life for your organization, right? Every time that you market what programs and services you are providing for your community, you're advocating for the benefits that your agency provides for your community. So it tends to be this scary kind of mysterious word. This people have an idea of what advocacy could be, meaning like Mr. Smith goes to Washington and dressing up in a 3-piece suit and having a Senate hearing in front of these big time political players. But really, it can be as simple as talking to your supporters, folks who come to your park, and letting them know all the great work that you're doing.
I love that phrase used earlier, connective tissue, because it is documenting the value that you provide every day to those that benefit from it, whether it's the park users or the program participants or the public at large or the local elected officials who are making decisions on budgets and priorities. And all that is connective to them to allow them to understand better what's going on and why this is important. So how can any individual, say, who's not done it before, how do they get started?
Well, I think the most important step before taking action is to get informed, right? So that means identifying what your goals are. What do you care about? Why are you coming to this work? So there's a framework in organizing and storytelling, and that's all effective advocacy is organizing and storytelling. So it's a framework called the story of self, us, and now. So you start with self. Why am I here? What is motivating me to join this movement? Whether I'm a park and recreation professional I'm a member of the public, or, you know, my child goes to the local park for their sports league. Why am I coming to this? Why do I want to tell my story? And what do I hope to accomplish by telling my story? Then you need to educate yourself, right? So if you say, I am coming to this because my local park is dilapidated, it needs funding, we need a new swing set, well, educate yourself on the issue. Why is there no swing set there? What are the underlying causes for your advocacy? Why do you need to be here? Is it more funding? Is it nobody uses that park? And you don't need to be an expert. And by any means, nobody is expecting you to be an expert on these issues. Just tell your story and your perspective on it, and that matters. So educate yourself about the issue, be aware about the issue, identify who's already doing stuff in this. So in this space, right? So if you are concerned about that swing set at your local park, maybe there's a Friends of the Park group that is already working on a campaign to raise funds to buy a new swing set to replace that old swing set. So identify who your supporters are. You know, go to your friends, your neighbors, people, your colleagues, and say, hey, I really care about this issue. And are you interested in joining me in this campaign? So building support for your goal. And then frankly, just tell your story. So, you know, it can be really scary for folks to reach out to elected officials because they think, oh, they're so busy. Why would they care about what I say? But we have to remember that they are elected officials. They report to us, and they are especially attuned to what their constituents are saying. So if you go to, whether it be your council person, your mayor, your representative, your senator, heck, even the president in the White House, if you say, hey, I am a constituent of yours and I care deeply about this issue and I want you to know about it, they're going to listen. So effective advocacy is just getting started.
Yes. And I found, even as I began many years ago, to remind myself that these elected officials are regular people.
Yes.
I can talk to them. I don't have to be intimidated just because they have a high office.
Mm-hmm.
And just keeping things in perspective like that helped me relax when I spoke with them. So that's great. Well, of course, we're looking for organizations and community groups that can get involved in speaking for Parks and Rec too. How would that be different, if any? I mean, it's still telling the story, but how can organizations or groups amplify what individuals say?
I think there are a lot of similarities between an individual getting involved and an organization or a community group getting involved. But there's power in stories and there's power in collective action. So community groups, they know their communities intimately. They're made up of people from those communities. They are experts on those communities and what those communities want and need. So recognizing your perspective in this world and what you bring to the table, right? So if you're a community group representing elders in your town, let's say, and elder groups are some of the most effective advocates in any space because they know how to get things done. But you know, say you have that perspective, you are a group of elders and you want to improve access of your local parks. Tell your story, right? If you are limited mobility individual and you say don't have a ramp to get to that creek that you really love, tell that story. I mean, it's very similar. It's advocacy at its basis level is just telling your story in a persuasive, effective way.
As well as you said before, there's power in collective action. And so to enlist organized groups that already have a unifying purpose or interest, then I think it's also good to reach out and enlist and leverage the media. So telling the story with your own voice is one way, but let's amplify that. Let's pull in the media and all its avenues, and how can we best employ them in the same goals?
Absolutely. So part of advocacy is recognizing that you cannot do everything yourself. There's no one person, there's no one organization that can affect change at a systemic level just by themselves. It just will not happen. So you have to form partnerships. And, frankly, that's kind of the beauty of it, is that you can build relationships within your community with other groups, and collectively you can accomplish so much more together. So you don't have to do every single thing in your world. You don't have to meet with your mayor and then your representative and then your senator. You don't have to put on events, community events. You don't have to do every single media outlet TV tour. You can work together to accomplish those goals, and frankly, understand and leverage your own strengths. And the media is a critical partner in that. So if effective advocacy is just effective storytelling, a way to tell your story is through the media, whether that's through a local op-ed in your community paper, or going on and having a spot on the local TV station, or frankly, we live in the 21st century. Social media is such a critical way to get out our message. Frankly, in Washington, D.C., a lot of the conversation is driven by Twitter. And a lot of the conversation locally is on Facebook, right? Like, if you see your neighbor sharing a story on Facebook, that's how you most often engage with them, especially in the era of social distancing. That's how you can tell your story. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an op-ed in the New York Times that's going to change the world. It can be you sharing a picture and a story of what happened to you in your local community, or something that you passionately care about. Frankly, when you want to enlist the media, their role in this is clicks, views. They want newsiness. They want a hook. So it has to be persuasive. You can't just expect something you care about to be put on the nightly news just because you care about it. There has to be something that ties it into a larger conversation. You have to place yourself in the movement. So, as we talk about building back better from the year of the coronavirus pandemic, looking forward, say you want to tell a story about your local park and rec agency, well, tell the story of how you helped us get through this pandemic and how you will help us build back better, how you will invest and invigorate this community, how park and rec agencies can be a catalyst for positive development, for economic growth. And remember, there's the old expression, if it leads, it leads. Yes, that's true, but also facts and figures, right? You can if you have a nugget of information, data that you can show, that is going to be something that people are going to glob onto. So, for instance, as we're talking about park and recreation agencies as this economic engine, this driver for local communities, research conducted by NRPA and the Center for Regional Analysis at George Mason University found that in 2017 alone, local park and recreation agencies generated 166 billion with the B dollars in economic activity and supported over 1 million jobs. That's staggering. But folks don't necessarily connect park and recreation agencies as this sort of economic engine, but they frankly are. So what are those figures? What are you doing at your community level that you can uplift and highlight in the media in your story to make it more newsworthy, more impactful? Those are great ways to get your message and get your story out and to build champions in the general public.
And that's exactly what I was referring to earlier when I said, documenting your value. What are the good things that are happening in the local community because of parks and recreation? Telling the story, as you said, is a catalyst for positive development and economic growth. And it helps to extend that story and get it into the listening ears of decision makers. But, for those who aren't so politically savvy, or it doesn't attract them as something that they ever want to do, the thought is the fact is that advocacy still works without intentionally drawing into any kind of politics. You can go and take your dog to a dog park, and with a little video on your phone, post on Facebook a 20-second clip of something very cute and fun, and share that you had this great time in the dog park, thanks to the local who built the park and keep it open and safe. And that, in effect, it's a small, short story, but it is showing support and telling the story of where you find some enrichment in your life and in your dog's life. So
Gotta remember the dogs.
it's easy to do. It can be tidbits at a time, but this stuff adds up, and it develops greater groundswell of public support, and that's what we're looking for. But
So-
let's go back to the officials, and so when we want to especially engage them, what's the best way to approach them? I know storming into their office probably is not a good idea, especially if you're all hepped up about something. But there's going to be some best practices, shall we call them, to approach your elected official. Why don't you take us through that door gently?
Yes, I appreciate that tongue-in-cheek lead-in. I would say storming is probably not the best way to go about it. But you're tying back to what you were just saying about individuals getting involved and taking these seemingly small actions that generate this groundswell of support. That is so accurate, and I just want to emphasize that point, because we often, humans are geared towards instant gratification, and we want, when we do something, we want it to be done. Frankly, that's just not how policy gets developed. That's not how change is affected. It's systemic, it's slow, it's repeated engagement in the system. So it's those small steps that you take as an individual, that your organization takes, that your community takes, that our elected officials take, that eventually get us to the place that we want to be. And it is a constant process. There's never going to be a day when we say we've arrived. We never have to engage on this issue ever again, because there will always be opportunities to be better, or to push, or to educate ourselves, or to grow. And that's the same thing with elected officials. So how to engage elected officials effectively? Frankly, you want to start with telling them who you are and why they should listen to you. So for most elected officials, that means you're a constituent of theirs. A senator from Wyoming may talk to me, but they're going to not really care about what I say if I don't vote for them. What's going to be more effective for that senator from Wyoming is if somebody who lives there, works in that state, in that community, tells them, hey, I voted you in office, or maybe I didn't vote you in office, but I am a constituent of yours, you represent me. They will listen to you. So starting off, just building a relationship and a rapport. So depending on what level you're working on, that can look very different, right? So at the local level, you may or may not know your mayor or city councilor, but they're pretty accessible to you. They have weekly meetings, they have office hours, and if you have the time and the ability, you can go see them in person. Maybe not in the age of coronavirus, but hopefully maybe with a mask, or 6 feet away, or as we are fully vaccinated, that can be a reality. And that's a great way to build rapport. And email works wonders, frankly. A written letter is beautiful in this day and age, but just making contact, making them aware of your issue. So I'll give an example from the DC perspective. Say that there's a bill that's being voted on, and you feel strongly about that bill. Calling that representative's office or that senator's office is effective, frankly, because the person who's answering that phone in that office, that staff member, has to record every single time somebody calls on a specific bill, whether they're for or against, and who that person approximately is. So getting yourself on the record and letting those elected officials know where you stand that will move them bit by bit by bit. So if you want to get somebody engaged in your movement, the best way to do that is to have them feel it, to have them see it, to be a part of it. So great way to do this, if you can do it safely and effectively, is to invite elected officials to come see, let's say, your park and recreation agency, an event that you're putting on, have them tour your facility, call them into the movement. It's a lot harder to say no to somebody when you're right in front of them after they just showed you all the amazing things that they do day in, day out for their community, and that elected official is in that environment, than when they're remotely in an office somewhere 200 miles away, and frankly, it's words on an email or it's a call over the phone. Calling people into the space and into the movement is a great way to build not just supporters, but champions for your work.
Well, it's all very true. And don't forget that a lot of our boroughs and townships, which operate on the local level all the time, have their regular meetings, and usually as part of the agenda is an open comment period from the public. So whoever shows up may have a turn to address them briefly with what's on their mind. And you've got their ear and their attention while they're right there in the same room. And that's an easy thing to take advantage of as well.
I would just want to share a quote that I think really encapsulates this. It's from Thomas Jefferson, and I'm going to paraphrase, but it's about our system of government. It says that we don't have a democracy of all people. We have a democracy of those who participate, right? So while we all have a vote, those who actively engage in the system, in the political process, will have an outsized influence because they're showing up and they're able to be there. So you may not have all the time in the world. You may have a million and one other things to do, but just showing up, telling your story makes such a difference.
Yes. And telling that story doesn't have to be confrontational. I mean, there's a time for confronting things, but there's also a time for gentle persuasion, to come back to that word, in telling the positive perspectives on a program or reason why we need a trail connection or whatever it is. So Abraham Lincoln said you can attract more flies with the honey. I think it came from that elder statesman whose folksy wisdom still works. We understand that analogy. Well,
absolutely. And I think you're so right, is positive framing and positive messaging is going to be so much more effective. Frankly, if you come at somebody very aggressively and say, come on, I can't believe why you didn't do X, Y, or Z, that person is less likely to then support X, Y, Z because they have a negative interpretation. But if you come at them and say, hey, listen, I want you to join us. I want you to be a supporter of us. Here's all the benefits that we bring to a community. Let's work together on this issue. Being positive, being friendly, but being firm about where you stand is the best way to ignore some good feelings and get people on your side. Again, it's not calling people out for being bad actors. It's calling them into the movement.
Well, can you tell us a bit? The NRPA has a Park Champions program that you're working on, which is effectively for grassroots advocacy and networking. So tell us how that is coming along.
Sure thing. So the Park Champions program, formerly, prior to me joining the organization, was sort of an events program, right? We would invite members of Congress out to go see a local park and rec agency, and they were great. People loved them. Members of Congress loved them. Agencies loved them. But frankly, we just couldn't do that many. We were limited in our capacity, and it was very much a top-down approach. So we are really looking to reimagine this program to empower our network of park and rec professionals across the country to engage in advocacy in their own communities on their own. And NRPA is a hub of resources, support, connective tissue, like we talked about earlier, to sort of, build that advocacy capacity from the grassroots so that these, these advocates, these park and rec advocates can affect change at their local level, at the state level and the federal level. And frankly, if people are engaged in their local communities, if they're engaged at the state level, they're much more likely to engage on issues that we are actively advocating for at the federal level.
And it is, the local event is the perfect opportunity to involve your local elected officials. We've had surveys that have demonstrated in Pennsylvania that those who are users of their local parks are more likely to support them when it comes to funding and priority planning. So bring them in, invite them into the parks. And coming up, July is National Recreation and Park Month, and the third Friday, July 16th, is Pennsylvania Park and Recreation Professionals Day, a day that honors the men and women who work tirelessly behind the scenes to provide the high-quality programs and facilities we both desire and expect in our parks and public spaces. So many of our community parks are going to be hosting a variety of public events. On July 16, consider it a tribute to your local park and rec providers to visit a park and enjoy its facilities and services. And while you're there, just perhaps mention a little thanks to the programmer, the manager, the maintainer, the landscaper, the facilitator, the lifeguard, the coach, the event organizer, or the caretaker. All of these aspects are parts of the job of providing these vital spaces for us. To the degree, Dan, that we're better able to advocate for our parks. You mentioned it's a long-term process, never ending, and we have to approach it from that viewpoint. But to the degree we're better able to advocate for our parks, what kinds of differences would you see for our future selves?
I think most people recognize that parks are vital spaces in communities that offer rejuvenation, replenishment, areas to get out and experience nature, and that's supported by the data. 7 out of 10 Americans go to their local park. Every single demographic group says that they love their local parks, but there's often this disconnect between that local park and the systems that support those local parks. So in my imagined future, we have this audience of folks who adore the things that we provide, who love the services that Park and Recreations offer, but maybe are not advocating on behalf of their local park or their Park and Rec agency. So the future that I envision is this groundswell of support behind park and recreation agencies, behind this industry, to further advance access, equitable access to green space, to recognize the importance of local parks in our efforts to combat climate change and investing in the resiliency of communities, whether that's from stormwater or erosion. Parks can really be an anchor of a community. So I envision this world where it's not taken for granted. We recognize in this country that conservation of public lands is something that our government should do. The maintenance of these lands, the expansion of these lands, the beautification, all of these things that go into maintaining these spaces for not just now, but for future generations. That's something that'll be incorporated into the average person's understanding of what parks can do and what parks already are doing. So I really think that we have an opportunity to build this groundswell, this grassroots advocacy network of park and rec professionals, of general public, members of the general public, elected officials, for folks who are not just going to the park on a weekend, but who are champions of their local park system.
Wonderful, great. When we're talking about a future selves, and of course that conjures up the term vision, and we want to see ourselves in better positions in the future. And um, if we can see it clearly and we show it creatively and we say it constantly, that's going to help us get us there. So where we can, for our own public good, the environmental, the social, the economic, the personal, and the community health and wellness of all of us together is one of the results of long-term effective advocacy. And so that's where we're trying to be heading, but it's steps at a time, certainly. So, all right, let's circle back to what's a starting goal for a beginning advocate?
In this space, I would say find the local park that you go to the most, find out who's maintaining that, whether it's a local or state group, find out, what you care about in this space and just start. So whether that means going to a city council meeting, sending an email, calling your representative, or going to a local event at a park and thanking a park and recreation professional or saying, how can I support this programming, these services, this organization, because it matters to me, it matters to my family, it matters to my community. So just getting involved. I think there's, plenty of opportunities at the local level, the state level that you should look into. If you want to work with NRPA, we would love to have you. You can sign up for action alerts on our website so that you can be informed and up to date with the most relevant advocacy alerts in this space, how you personally can get involved, the difference that you can make. And, we have affiliates at the state level who do this work. So if you want to work at the local level, the state level, the federal level, there are ways to get involved. It's just a matter of getting out there and finding them.
And I would add that the Pennsylvania Recreation and Park Society is a state affiliate of National Recreation and Park Association. And we too have an organized advocacy group that works and meets monthly and produces position statements and action alerts as needed. And you can find them on that website of prps.org. Well, from the tiny details to the comprehensive big picture, advocacy is an all-encompassing term, but there is room on that spectrum for anybody to put a toe in there and start flinging a propeller or powered mobility device through it, because there's plenty to do and plenty of aspects that you can specialize if you like. Well, we have appreciated you for joining us so much, Dan. Any parting insights or encouragement you'd like to toss out there before we conclude?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Tim. And this was a great conversation. And I really hope folks have taken something away from this and feel empowered to act on behalf of Park and Recreation, on behalf of their local community. I would say, if you get nothing out of this, apart from this, is the facts and data are on your side. People love Park and Recreation. People value what they bring to communities. It's just a matter of telling that story and making that connective tissue between what people see in their daily lives and the policy changes that we need to advance to secure those for now and our future selves. So get started, tell your story, build coalitions, and recognize that the time is now.
Telling your story, and it is our time, Parks and Rec time. Following up on last year and how we have demonstrated the need for these spaces and these services. Let's keep that momentum going and show everybody where we can go from here. So thanks again, Dan, for joining us. Good words, good advice, good encouragement, and we offer that to all the listeners. Good Air is an online show featuring conversations with park and recreation providers and users, and it's a production of the Good for You, Good for All campaign for Pennsylvania Recreation and Parks. To explore more than 6,000 Pennsylvania parks, log into good4pa.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Tim Hurd.